आपके जुनून और किस तरीके से आपने विपरीत परिस्थितियों में भी ये काम किया, और निश्चित रूप से आज हम सभी के लिए आप प्रेरणा का स्रोत हैं। थैंक यू सो मच मैम, वेलकम। आपकी प्रेजेंटेशन का इंतजार है।
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, respected members of Parliament, my fellow awardees, and all dignitaries present here. I'll begin with a little introduction of myself. Basically, I'm a medical doctor. I'm from Maulana Azad Medical College, New Delhi, and I was in CGHS, Central Government Health Services, for 25 years. In fact, in this very Parliament annexee, I have worked for 2 to 3 years in the CGHS department here. Some of the respected members may also remember me from North Avenue, where I was there for 10 years. So 10 years back, I took a voluntary retirement with 14 years of my service still left. And the reason was that I really wanted to follow my passion and my purpose of life, because I realized that I had been born for a specific purpose. Being an Indian woman with a disability, I realized that very deeply. I was 3 years of age when I got polio. And you can imagine that it was a long and hard struggle, which I felt that I had to do largely by myself. So I realized that my purpose was to make others who were different feel more and more included, respected, and valued. I prepared myself for this field while I was in job by learning psychology, NLP, and many such related themes. I used to work during the day and research and study during the night. I found that other countries around the world had been doing this work for far longer than we. We had not even begun yet. When we thought of diversity, we thought of different states, we thought of religion, we thought of gender, but nothing more than that. I started reaching out to thought leaders and experts around the world. The universe supported me, and I was trained by some of the best thought leaders in the world, including Dr. John Gray, who's the author of Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. This made me bring back some of the knowledge from around the world to here. I started in the corporate sector. Doing the work of diversity and inclusion. In India, at that time, it was largely gender. I would try to tell people diversity is more than gender, but we were focused on gender. Of course, it was very important, and it is very important even now. We have a lot of work to do in that area, and I'll just show you a few slides. And as I went on to do this work, in 2017, I was invited to one of the largest diversity conferences in the world in Minneapolis to represent India. Like all of us, I was doing my homework in the last minute. And suddenly, I was embarrassed, because in India, our situation was not good at all, especially as far as gender is concerned. There is a World Economic Forum which benchmarks countries in the global gender gap. It measures the gap on 4 parameters: the economic status of women, political, health, and financial. And we in India were way below. Scandinavian countries like Norway were on the top. And in 2017, it was further embarrassing to see that instead of making progress, we had gone down 17 notches. So I said, I'm not coming, because if I'm not coming, nobody's talking about India. How can I stand there and speak this about my country? But that time the invites had already gone out. So we turned the situation to see what can India do to leverage its woman power. The answer came out to be digital fluency. And then I spoke about the Prime Minister's initiative on Digital India and many such initiatives. And then I said to all the thought leaders and people present there, but India is not my responsibility alone. We are talking about global inclusion, and all of you are also responsible for that. that somehow turned very lucky, and those people became committed to come to India. We held a conference for the first time. We held a diversity and inclusion conference in India, global conference, where all these thought leaders came and shared their best practices and their views with the people of India. It started a movement from then to now, I can say, in the corporate sector. It started a movement. The picture you see there is with me in Walmart with the girls, the store girls of Easy Day at Walmart. We can see more pictures perhaps. Next slide, please. Here, I would go to the remotest corners in India, to the manufacturing plants of the Aditya Birla Group, PepsiCo, Tata Group, Vedanta Group, and I found that this is the place. Earlier I used to find it hard. Travel was tough, but I found this is the place they need me the most. There would be no toilets for women either on the way or in these plant locations. Conditions were very tough. But we began dismantling the mindset and the belief of people there. Why are girls not good for factories? And I would meet young engineers, girls, who would say, they asked me, तुमको और कुछ मिला नहीं तो तुमने mechanical engineering की है क्या? ये लड़की है ये तो चली जाएगी. And they would tell me, we want to be here. We want to be in factories. We have done mechanical engineering from our choice. And then we began dismantling the beliefs of all of them there to say, why are girls not good for factories? They would say, muscle power. I would say, but most of your machines are automated. Then they said, heat. I said, which book says that men can bear heat better than women? Then they said, language which we use with our frontline people. I said, that culture will change when women come in. You have to get more and more numbers for that culture to change. What was so heartening for me, that by the end of the day, they would acknowledge, these people, that it was a mindset, and we are seeing a different picture now. But that was not always the case. Very often I was attacked. People would fight and say, why are you taking away the rights of men? I am a deserving candidate. Why reservation? Why are you doing this? Suddenly you want women. Why this woman agenda? And I had to have very tough conversations with people there. The first 5-6 years, one has to leave your ego aside. And sometimes you're badly insulted. Sometimes people lose their temper. But creatively, we had to get their buy-in. Next slide, please. Now, after having done all the work in the corporate sector, I realized that the word diversity and inclusion, outside the corporate sector, nobody knows that. When people ask me, what do you do? And I say, I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant. And they say, what is that? And then I say, oh my God, this is restricted only to corporate, not even in our educational institutes. After getting the Padma Shri, I was invited to Labasna. Some of you may have also been invited. We were felicitated there. We were asked to give a keynote there. And I told the director, I said, these are the makers of our country, the civil services students. It should be part of their curriculum. Instant response was, let's do it. Can you stay back? I stayed back there 3 days. We have now introduced diversity and inclusion in the curriculum of the civil service students of India. And this is a picture of that. Next slide, please. Yeah, these are all the women that we've been working with. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is one of the plants. Next, please. Recently, I'm proud to say that I was invited to the UN. I'm now speaking, and perhaps the first Indian to be speaking on diversity and inclusion in the UN. Next slide, please. All right, now I just wanted to give you a very brief concept, because what Sankumar spoke about of biases, the letter I, what kind it invokes in people, how the institutes were closed down, how domestic violence still is so prevalent and women can be thrown out. These are all conscious and unconscious biases. Yesterday we heard that a woman had to prove herself by putting her hand in hot oil. So these biases are what prevents women and other underrepresented and marginalized groups like people with disabilities, people from LGBTQ group, people of lower socioeconomic or lower castes being included in the mainstream. Until we look at those biases, until we form strategies for inclusion through policies, it's not enough to just get the numbers and the quotas. Through the policies, we have to create an inclusive environment for them. It is the leaders of the country, it is the leaders of organization, it is all of you who need to set the tone, because all of you here are leaders. These are 6, what you see on the screen, these are 6 leadership competencies of an inclusive leader, starting from cognizance. Are we even aware that there are biases? Who are the groups that are marginalized? How are the biases happening? How do they play out? And how do they impact people? That's the cognizance part. Then there is curiosity. Are you listening to the lived experience of people who have these differences? It's not enough to sit in your chairs and imagine those differences unless you talk to them. And that is the cultural intelligence. Then you come to collaboration. How do we ensure that people with differences can collaborate and work with the others? How men can work with women? How people with disabilities can work? See, I know this. When I passed the UPSC exam and I wanted to join CGHS, they said, we can't take you even though you cleared the exam because you have to go on home visits and you will not be able to climb the stairs. I said, but I will be able to climb the stairs. They still made me go through. I lost 1.5 years in that battle. And I said, why did you make me a doctor? Why did you not tell me, if you are not going to give me a job, why did you make me a doctor? Why did you not tell me at that time? Why did you let me give the UPSC exam? So there is a whole struggle about how do we mainstream people. And then there is a commitment from the leaders to say, we are going to be the allies of the underrepresented group and create those policies. Next slide, please. So I just want to touch upon the different layers of diversity. You know, we think of it as small, but it's actually very big. Starting from our personal identity, our age, our nationality, our sexual orientation, our ethnicity. That's the innermost core on which we have no control, and yet we are discriminated. And then the layers go on. You see the external layers about your appearance, your marital status. People question all sorts of questions. In one company, they said, एक तो लड़की है, ऊपर से काली है, company ने तुम्हें क्यों भेज दिया sales के लिए? These are the kind of comments. And then, of course, there are organizational. India has a large, I think every one of us must be aware of it. Hierarchy and power distance is largest in India. And until we provide that psychological safety for our junior people to be able to speak up, our youth will never be able to come up. So these are some of the layers, and just for a moment I can talk about how do the neuroscience of biases. Next slide, please. See, scientists estimate that we are bombarded with 11 million pieces of information at any one time. Our brain can only deal with 40 to 50 pieces of this information. So we filter out some and retain some. Biases are normal to every human being. It's a part of our brain. If there is anyone here who says, I don't have biases, then you're questioning science. You're questioning neuroscience. So what are biases? Next slide, please. Biases are preferences for or against. I may like a certain, consciously I may want to like a certain group and not like a certain group. Or they may be completely unconscious and we have no idea that we have a bias. But because it has been programmed into our brain for such a long time, it impacts the people around us. Stereotyping. What is stereotyping? Stereotyping is overgeneralizations. Women are not going to travel. Women cannot relocate. Women are not good for certain roles. Women are not good in STEM industries. We still have such a lot of shortage in India of women in science, technology, engineering, and maths. These are stereotypes, right? So next slide, please. I want to, especially following of what Sankhuma said, this beautiful slide of equity versus equality. Now, when you talked about concession, that if they cannot lift weight, are we willing to give a concession? That is equity. The difference between equality and equity is very clear in front of you. It's not enough that you give everybody equal opportunity. We are all equal, you said. You bring them to the fence that small person is not going to be able to see the match. Equity means looking after specific needs. It also means making up for the backlog of the past. When we spoke about women in Mizoram, and we spoke about the huge backlog of what they have gone through, they need equity. They need specific policies for their safety, for their representation, for seats in the leadership positions, for their developmental programs. Until we have those policies, it will not be equity. Now, I'm questioned. This is another area where people fight with me and say, why? I'm a deserving candidate, why? Next slide, please. And then you say, okay, let's look at certain facts and figures. And now I'm talking about more than gender. Look at this. More than 50% of non-Dalit Hindu households practice untouchability in Rajasthan and in rural Uttar Pradesh. Only 12% of female representation in board of directors of global multinational locations. There is a drop in employment due to COVID-19 was 14%. All vulnerable groups were impacted with COVID-19. Next slide, please. By 2050, India will be the most populous country in the world. And if you look at the number of male versus female, females are 48%. Why is there less number of women, girls, than men? Because right from female feticide to nutrition is deprived for female children, and therefore we have less number of women than men. 48.1% is the total number. Next slide, please. See, globally, as a doctor, I can tell you, and I have more doctors here with me, they would agree with me, that globally girls, female infants and neonates survive more than male neonates. They have a higher resilience. Then why in India we have lesser number of female children and lesser number of women? Lot of facts here. I don't want to go into all in interest of time, but it shows us, data shows us that undernutrition is widespread nationally. In a study, you saw that anxiety and depression is much more in women than in men, and the impact is due to marginalization, not being involved in decision making, lack of financial security, and all of this. Less than one quarter of women in India aged 15 and older can obliterate the mouse. Such is the dynamics of people, dominant groups, people of privilege, and the non-dominant groups or the marginalized groups. They are always, we call it the diversity tax. Apart from the work they do, they always have to calculate in the brain, what should I say? What should I not say? How much should I say? What will be accepted? Where will I sound ignorant? Where will I get a pushback? And that they also face, next slide please, they also face a number of microaggressions. This is another important term I think everybody should know today. I spoke of power distance. Microaggressions are very small acts, like interrupting somebody, like in a meeting ignoring two people, like speaking in a certain language that others don't understand, or sometimes even harsher, being sarcastic. Let me hear your expert comments, please. And I hear women and underrepresented groups face this enormously in their workplaces. My main area of work is workplaces. We need to increase the GDP of our country. This is not just a good thing to do. Trillions of dollars we can increase the GDP of our country by mainstreaming women and other marginalized groups and giving them a self-worth as equal to everybody else. So that is an area I think especially in India, that we still need to do a lot of work. Okay. Now, finally, we were speaking about the policies. I just want to mention that being a national icon and a board member of the Election Commission of India, the Election Commission has done commendable work last year by introducing postal ballots. There were booths where there was just one person for which the ballot was done because it was more accessible to the person with disability. Ramps, braille, all that has been done tremendously revamped in the last year. Transgender, inclusion of transgender people, sensitization of the booth personnel, enormous work. This is the kind of work we need in every sector. So here is my ask from our honorable leaders. Be the sponsors and champions of change by repeated messages on inclusion. Empower the youth to be catalyst of change by incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion into the curriculum, like we just did at Labasna. It's not there in rest of the schools and colleges. We need to do that. Sensitization of all ministry personnel, sensitization of teachers, sensitizing healthcare professionals, and providing equity in public and private sectors for all marginalized groups. Last slide, please. This is all I have to say, and I am open to questions.
थैंक यू सो मच मैम, इट्स वेरी इंस्पायरिंग और जिस तरीके से
And the jazba, you see, which Dr. Niru Kumar has, you see, she's handicapped. In spite of her handicap, if she can do so much of work, I think well-bodied person should get inspiration from her and start, you see, doing something for our country. We should live for our country, you see. Western world, you see, has been doing all researches, everything has been, you see, taken over by Western world. Why not India? You see, we are 1.3 billion, you see, the 1/5 of world population, and we are lacking so much in research. You see, I think the government must promote the such attitude of some people, you see, who are doing. Like, you see, I have also done something unique which nobody has done in the whole of the world. That is what I'm going to speak in my talk in the afternoon. But you see, we should give Dr. Niru Kumar and get her policies implemented by Government of India and give her a standing ovation. Yes. Wonderful, wonderful.
I am very, very, very humbled. Very humbled. Thank you so much.
और नीरू जी, आपके लिए तो हमारे प्रधानमंत्री ने भी जो शब्द दिया है, दिव्यांग, ऐसे लोग जिनके पास दिव्य अंग होते हैं और वो बाकी उन लोगों से कहीं ज़्यादा प्रेरणा के स्रोत होते हैं, और आप तो फिर बहुत आगे, क्योंकि दिव्य अंगों के माध्यम से और आपकी सोच, आपका जुनून, आपका जज्बा जिसने इन सब कामों को किया लोगों के लिए, वो निश्चित रूप से अनुकरणीय है, सराहनीय है। और कोई क्वेश्चन आमंत्रित है या फिर हम आगे बढ़ें? जी बताइए।
मैडम पोलियो से ग्रस्त है, अब उस जमाने में शायद इसका इतना वो ट्रीटमेंट नहीं होगा, बट आई हैव बीन वर्किंग ऑन फुट डिफॉर्मिटी स्पेशली, यू सी, फॉर द लास्ट 60 years, you see. I have spent a lifetime, my age is 85, and I have spent, you see, whole of my life for doing research on the foot. And you see, really, madam, Andy, I would like to help you if I could, you see. But थोड़ा टाइम लगेगा। मैं आज यहीं हूँ, कल यहीं हूँ, परसों जाना है, तो let us meet and if I can do something for you.
I just want to congratulate you because I have also in the next talk I just said that एक सक्षम व्यक्ति है, उसका कंपैरिजन जो है जब अक्षम से किया जाता है तो वो भी बहुत बड़ा डिस्क्रिमिनेशन है। और इस बात के लिए जो अभी आपने बातों को उठाया है कि इन लोगों को हर हालत में सपोर्ट की ज़रूरत है, जो अभी आपने एक शब्द दिया इक्वलिटी से लेके इक्विटी का, तो हाँ, इसको हमें बहुत अंडरस्टैंड करना चाहिए और जो सुविधाएं जो हम लोगों को मिल रही हैं वो उन लोगों को मिले जो हमसे भी अंडर प्रिविलेज हैं एंड डाउन रोडेड हैं। तभी देश की तरक्की होगी। और तभी जैसे आपने अभी कहा कि जब महिलाएं हैं, 50% देश की जनसंख्या है जो हमारे राष्ट्र निर्माण में उतना योगदान नहीं दे पा रही जितना देना चाहिए, तो सच में है कि हमारा देश कितना नीचे अपने आप को ही कर रहा है। धन्यवाद।
सिर्फ रिजर्वेशन से बात नहीं बनेगी।
नहीं बनेगी।
आपने 15%, 20% रिजर्वेशन कर दी, उससे
Yes.
कुछ नहीं बनेगा।
Yes.
We have to make them, disabled abled. You see, that is what we should do, and it is not difficult at all. You see, that is what I have learned in my whole life.
जी
Again, I want to thank be the useful for everyone. Thank you, madam.
थैंक यू सो मच।
Ma'am,
इसमें किसी की अनकॉन्शियस बायस में किसी की गलती नहीं है। जैसे मैंने कहा, सबके पास अनकॉन्शियस बायस है। मैं जो ये काम करती हूँ दिन रात, मेरी भी अनकॉन्शियस बायसेस हैं। उस दिन किसी ने मेरे को कहा कि हमारे सेक्रेटरी से बात कर देना, एंड आई सेड शी, व्हाई एम आई अज्यूमिंग दैट अ सेक्रेटरी इज अ फीमेल, राइट? सो इवन आई हैव बायसेस, बट हाउ टू ओवरकम देम? द बिगेस्ट थिंग इज फीडबैक। जब आपको कोई बोलता है और कहता है कि हमें ये प्रॉब्लम हुई है या मुझे ये बायस महसूस हुई है, हम अक्सर डिफेंसिव हो जाते हैं और उसको सुनते नहीं हैं। The best people to tell us that we have biases is the people who are being discriminated. क्या उनके पास वो साइकोलॉजिकल सेफ्टी है? क्या हमने ये माहौल क्रिएट किया हुआ है कि हर कोई, अगर हम लीडर्स हैं, अगर हम पीपल ऑफ पोजीशन है, हर कोई आगे हमें ये बात बोल सके, तभी पता चलेगा, नहीं तो नहीं पता चलेगा। और उसके बाद उसको अपने जहन में, अपनी अवेयरनेस में कंटिन्यूअसली रखना, एंड अगेन सीक फीडबैक। What best can I do to support you? Then equip yourself with reading. Once you read about, if you are really concerned about doing this, थोड़ी तो research पढ़नी पड़ेगी, and you will know that. Read articles on psychological safety. Read articles on inclusion. It will really give you a lot of material there.
थैंक यू सो मच मैम।
I think we can.
you see, rehabilitation of physically handicapped has 4 components. The first one is the physical rehabilitation. That is, if his or her physical disability can be corrected, it must be corrected. And after that comes the vocational rehabilitation. You see, vocational rehabilitation का मतलब उसको कोई जो वो कर सकता हो वो उसको काम दिया जाए। जैसे supposing you see somebody is paralyzed but he can work as a telephone attendant. What is the problem? Why can't it be this type of job can be reserved especially for these people, you see? And then psychological rehabilitation, which is the most important. You see, these people are, you see, psychologically depressed because they feel that they are
Thank you,
not
sir.
used.
अब इसी के साथ हम अपनी